I was grocery shopping when a woman tapped me on the shoulder. "Your grandson is so well behaved," she said with a smile. I looked at her, confused. "I don't have a grandson." Her smile faded. "That little boy, he's been following you since the park." I turned around and saw a small child I had never seen before. The boy took my hand. "Grandma, can we go home now? I'm so glad I found you." If you're listening to this story, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to know where you're listening from, so please leave a comment below. I want to see how far this story goes. That morning, I locked the door of my small house and walked slowly to my usual bus stop. The street leading to the bus stop looked the same as always. But today, the sky was clearer, and the sun cast a gentle light on the treetops, making my heart feel light in a way that's hard to explain. I waited for the bus, breathing in the crisp morning air. In that moment, I felt like I was still connected to this world, even though it sometimes ached in my soul. The bus made its way through the familiar streets. Through the dusty window, I saw early morning joggers, delivery trucks making their rounds, and kids chasing each other happily down the sidewalk. The park near the grocery store seemed more alive than usual today. The sound of children's laughter was clear as they ran back and forth under the green trees. A few elderly people were doing their morning exercises, their movements slow but full of energy. Young couples walked hand in hand under the shade, their eyes shining with happiness. Without meaning to, my eyes followed them, and a warmth spread through my chest. The pure laughter of the children reminded me of Andrew, my son, when he was still little. That boy used to grab my hand and run all over the park, babbling nonsensical stories. The memory was so vivid, I could almost hear his voice nearby, even though Andrew was a grown man now, with his own family, and with cracks in his life that I never wanted to talk about. The bus stopped in front of the grocery store. I got off, adjusted my scarf, and walked calmly inside. On Saturday mornings, the place was always crowded, but I liked the bustling feeling. It made me feel like a part of life, with small things to do to keep myself busy. I took a basket and moved slowly through the fresh produce section. The smell of damp earth from the bunches of spinach, the mild scent of kale, and the bright red tomatoes made me feel good. I paused to carefully select each bunch, each tomato, turning them gently to make sure they weren't bruised. It was a habit from when I was young, when I cooked for the whole family, and my kitchen was always filled with laughter. When I reached the fruit section, I found myself in front of piles of red apples shining under the store's lights. I was distractedly listening to the announcements for special deals over the loudspeaker while I chose some of the juiciest ones. The sweet aroma of the apples brought a smile to my face, thinking about making a fruit salad for dinner. While I was focused on my selections, I suddenly felt a light tap on my shoulder. I turned, a little startled. A woman about my age, with her hair pulled back in a bun, was smiling at me kindly. "Your grandson is very obedient," she said in a friendly tone. "He's been following you this whole time without crying or throwing a tantrum." I froze, as if someone had shaken me out of a dream. "What grandson?" I replied, my voice trembling. "I came to the store alone." A strange feeling began to grow inside me, as if something wasn't right. I had lived alone for many years, ever since Andrew left home, and I never had grandchildren. The woman's words confused me, as if she were talking about someone else, about another life that wasn't mine. The woman also seemed surprised by my reaction. She pointed behind me with a look of bewilderment. "The boy is right behind you," she said softly, as if she were afraid of scaring someone. I turned slowly, my heart racing, not understanding why. And then I saw him. A little boy, about 5 or 6 years old, was standing there, just a few feet away from me. His clothes were simple, a faded blue t-shirt and shorts that were a little frayed at the hem. His big, bright eyes looked at me without blinking, as if searching for something very important. In his arms, he clutched an old stuffed animal, its fur matted and dirty, as if it had been his companion for a long time. When he noticed me looking, he pressed his lips together, a flicker of fear in his expression, but his face also held a spark of hope, like a ray of sun peeking through the leaves. Before I could say anything, the boy took a shy step toward me. His small hand reached out and gently took mine. That little hand was cold, trembling, but it squeezed mine tightly, as if he were afraid I would disappear. "Grandma," he said in a weak little voice, as fragile as the wind. "Can we go home now?" I stood there paralyzed, my hand trapped in his, trembling uncontrollably. I didn't understand what was happening. I looked at him, trying to find some explanation in those clear eyes. But all I saw was a sincerity that hurt. I felt a lump in my chest, a mix of something unknown and familiar, as if I had seen him before in a dream or a lost memory. Around us, a few shoppers started to stop, looking at us with curiosity. A soft murmur rippled through the air, like small waves on a lake. The woman from before shook her head and muttered, almost just to me, "That's strange. I saw him following you all the way from the park." The park. A shiver ran down my spine. This morning, when I passed by the park, I had a strange feeling, as if someone was watching me. But I thought it was just an impression, a whim of an old woman who thinks too much. Now, the woman's words made my skin crawl. The atmosphere grew heavy, as if the entire grocery store was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I stammered, my voice trembling, trying to stay calm. "No, he's not my grandson." I spoke without daring to look him directly in the eyes, fearing that his gaze would disarm me. But he didn't let go of my hand. Instead, he squeezed it tighter, as if clinging to me, to his last hope. His eyes watched me silently, but it was as if they were pleading, "Don't leave me." The curious stares of the people around me weighed on me, suffocating. I didn't know who this child was, but his hope-filled eyes were tearing my soul apart. I couldn't just stand there, surrounded by whispers and stares. I had to do something. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself, and gently led him by the hand toward the customer service area at the back of the store. Along the way, I clearly felt each of the boy's small steps, slow but following me closely. He said nothing, just hugged a worn-out stuffed animal tightly, as if it were the only thing that gave him a little security. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye, and a strange feeling ran through me. I had lived alone for too long, accustomed to the silence of my small house and the quiet passing of days. But now, a strange child was calling me Grandma, and I didn't know how to face it. At the customer service counter, I was met by a burly security guard with a gentle voice. I tried to explain, with a slight tremor in my voice, "This boy, I think he's lost. He's lost his mom or dad. I don't know him, but he's followed me from the park to here." The guard nodded, knelt down to look at the boy, and spoke to him carefully, as if afraid to scare him. "Hey there, little guy. What's your name? Where are your parents?" The boy just lowered his head, clutching the stuffed animal tighter without saying a word. His big eyes stared at the floor, as if he wanted to hide from the world. The guard looked at me and shrugged helplessly. I sighed, sat down next to the boy, and tried to soften my voice as much as possible. "Honey, what's your name? Can you tell me?" I don't know why I referred to myself as Grandma with him, but it came out so naturally, as if my heart had accepted something my mind still couldn't comprehend. The boy lifted his gaze. His tear-filled eyes shone under the store's bright white lights. His voice was fragile, almost a whisper. Oscar. A single word, but it was like a stone dropping into a still lake inside me, creating nameless ripples. Oscar. I repeated the name in my mind, trying to find a memory, some clue, but I found nothing. I smiled at him, hoping my smile would reassure him. Oscar. That's a very nice name. Don't be afraid. Grandma will help you find your parents, okay? A young store employee with a kind smile brought a paper cup of water and placed it in front of Oscar. Have a little water, sweetie, she said, and then looked at me. Please sit here with him for a moment. I'll take you to the security office and we'll make an announcement over the loudspeaker to find his family. I nodded gratefully, feeling a sense of relief. Maybe in a little while, Oscar's parents would show up and everything would be resolved. But deep down, there was something that didn't want that to happen. I didn't know why. The security office was small, barely fitting an old wooden desk and a few plastic chairs. The voice from the loudspeaker echoed again and again, announcing that a boy named Oscar, about 5 or 6 years old, was waiting for his family at the grocery store. I sat next to Oscar. He remained silent, his small hand never letting go of mine for a second. Sometimes he would squeeze it tighter, as if afraid I would get up and leave him. I looked down and saw his worn-out canvas sneakers, the seams coming apart, and my heart ached. Such a little boy. How could he be all alone, without parents, without family? More than 30 minutes passed, feeling like an eternity. The loudspeaker kept repeating the announcement, but no one appeared. There were no calls, not a single parent running to the counter with a worried face. I started to feel anxious. Oscar was still motionless beside me, his head down, clutching his stuffed animal as if it were the last thing he had in the world. I couldn't hold back any longer and turned to him, speaking softly. Oscar, tell me, why did you follow me? The boy lifted his gaze, his big eyes shining with a hint of doubt. His voice was as quiet as a mosquito's buzz, almost drowned out by the noise of the supermarket. I saw Grandma in the park. I followed you from there to here. His words were like a lightning strike, hitting my memory directly. This morning, in the park, I had felt someone's gaze on me. A vague but clear sensation. I thought it was just the imagination of a sensitive old woman, but now Oscar was confirming it. The boy had followed me from the park, through the crowded streets, to this grocery store. I was stunned, not knowing how to respond. Then, where are your parents? I asked, my voice trembling, hoping his answer would clear everything up. But Oscar just pressed his lips together tightly and shook his head firmly, as if the question touched a wound so deep he didn't want to remember it. His eyes lowered, and I saw a tear slide down his cheek, shining before it fell onto the worn stuffed animal he clutched in his arms. My heart felt heavy. I wanted to hug him, to tell him everything would be okay, but I didn't know if I had the right. Who was I to this child? A stranger, an old woman he crossed paths with in the park. But that small hand, that trembling grip, made me feel a strange bond, as if fate had purposely placed him in my life. The store employees began to gather, murmuring among themselves. I overheard them talking about the police, about checking files of missing children. The young employee from before turned to me, her tone apologetic. Ma'am, it's been over 30 minutes and still no one has come. I think this case is a bit complicated. Why don't you take the boy to the nearest police station so they can look into it further? I can go with you if you need. I nodded. Even though I was still a mess inside, I knew taking Oscar to the police was the right thing to do. But seeing him cling to me, his little hand refusing to let go of mine, a vague fear crept over me. What would happen to him if they couldn't find his parents? What if he really had been abandoned? The thought broke my heart as if I were taking on a responsibility bigger than myself. I took Oscar's hand and we left the grocery store. I called a taxi that was parked nearby. It was almost noon. The sun was starting to burn hotter, but inside I felt cold. Oscar got into the car and snuggled up next to me, the stuffed animal still pressed against his chest. Every time the taxi braked suddenly, the boy would instinctively squeeze my hand, seeking security. I looked at him, at his pale little face, his big eyes filled with fear and hope. "Don't be afraid," I murmured, my voice trembling. "I'll be here with you." The door to the police station opened. A blast of cold air hit me, mixed with the smell of old coffee and papers. The white fluorescent lights illuminated the stained walls, making me shiver involuntarily. I held Oscar's hand tightly. I led him inside with slow steps, though my heart felt as heavy as lead. The boy still clutched his ragged stuffed animal, his worn-out canvas shoes dragging on the tile floor, making a faint scuffing sound. I looked down at him. His big eyes showed fear, but he clung to me as if I were his whole world at that moment. I felt a lump in my throat, a mix of tenderness and confusion. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I couldn't abandon this child. We were taken to a small waiting room, a little space with a few old plastic chairs and a wooden table covered in scratches. I sat down and pulled Oscar to sit beside me. His hand was still clasped in mine, cold and trembling. A young police officer came in, thin but with a kind look in his eyes. He introduced himself as Officer Miller and then sat across from us, placing a notepad on the table. "Can you tell me the whole story?" he asked in a patient voice. I took a deep breath, trying to sort through what had happened in my head. My voice shook a little as I recounted everything, from crossing the park that morning with the strange feeling of being watched, to the moment in the grocery store when Oscar took my hand and called me Grandma. I told him slowly, detail by detail, as if searching for some hidden clue in my own story. Miller listened attentively, occasionally jotting something down in his notepad. His gaze was focused, though he couldn't hide a certain concern. When I finished, he nodded and turned to Oscar, lowering his voice gently. "Hey, little guy, can you help me out a bit? Do you remember where your house is?" Oscar lowered his head, squeezing his stuffed animal so hard that the seams strained even more. He shook his head without saying a word. Miller didn't give up and continued asking, always in a calm tone. "Okay, so what are your parents' names, or anyone else from your house that you remember?" This time, Oscar bit his lip so hard I saw a small trickle of blood. He didn't answer, just bowed his head further, as if trying to hide within himself. I couldn't stop myself, and gently rubbed his back, speaking softly. "Oscar, tell me, honey. Everyone at home must be so worried about you." But he just shook his head, his eyes full of tears, looking at me as if begging me not to ask any more questions. That look pierced my heart, as if I had accidentally touched a wound too deep for him to show anyone. Miller sighed, stood up, and motioned to a colleague. "We're going to check the list of missing children in the city," he told me before leaving the room. I stayed there next to Oscar, feeling the weight of an overwhelming silence. The hum of the air conditioner, the footsteps of officers in the hallway, and the constant ticking of the wall clock seemed to count every second of the wait. I passed Oscar a bottle of water that the grocery store employee had given me, which was still in my bag. "Here, honey, have a little drink," I said, forcing a smile. The boy took the bottle and took small sips, but he never took his eyes off me, as if he were afraid that if he blinked, I would disappear. A female officer with a kind face and hair pulled back in a high ponytail came in. She introduced herself as Officer Davis, then sat next to Oscar and leaned down to his level. "Oscar, do you want to tell me a little about your home?" she asked in a gentle voice, like a mother cooing to her child. I promise I won't be mad. I just need you to tell me a little bit, okay? But Oscar remained silent, his lips pressed together and his gaze directed downwards. Davis looked at me and shook her head slightly, as if to say she didn't know what else to do. Time passed slowly, each minute as heavy as a rock on my chest. I kept wondering, who is Oscar? Why is he following me? And why won't he say anything about his family? I looked at the boy, saw his little shoulders trembling slightly, and a strange feeling arose within me, both distant and familiar. I wanted to protect him, to take care of him, although I didn't understand why I felt this way. Nearly an hour later, Miller returned, a faint trace of disappointment on his face. We checked the list of missing children in the city, but there are no cases that match Oscar's description, he said, his voice graver. There are no reports of a boy named Oscar, about 5 or 6 years old, in recent months. His words made my spirits sink. No reports? Then where were this child's parents? Why wasn't anyone looking for him? The idea that Oscar might have been abandoned made my heart ache, as if I were seeing my own reflection on my loneliest days. An older officer with graying hair entered the room. He introduced himself as Sergeant Thompson, the shift supervisor. He looked at Oscar, then at me, with eyes full of thought. "Ma'am," he said, his voice deep and deliberate, "I've seen many cases like this. Sometimes children don't get lost by accident, but for more complex reasons. It could be that they're separated from a relative or that there's a problem in the family." He paused, as if weighing something, and continued. "I suggest we do a DNA test. Sometimes that helps find a clue, especially when the child doesn't want to talk." The proposal stunned me. A DNA test? The idea blew over me like an icy wind, making me shiver. I didn't have grandchildren. I didn't have anyone besides Andrew, my son. But when I looked at Oscar, I saw him nod slightly, a fragile glimmer of hope in his eyes, and I felt I couldn't refuse. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling. "I agree." I signed the document Sergeant Thompson handed me, my hand shaking so much the pen almost fell. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had to do something for Oscar. The procedure for taking the DNA sample was quick. A nurse came and carefully took swabs from my mouth and Oscar's. The boy didn't resist. He just held my hand tightly throughout the process, as if he were afraid that if he let go, everything would fall apart. When they finished, Sergeant Thompson told me, "The results will be ready in a few days. Go home and rest. We'll contact you as soon as we have the information." He looked at Oscar and smiled faintly. "And the boy? Can you take care of him in the meantime? If not, we'll have to take him to a foster home." Foster home. That phrase squeezed my heart. I looked at Oscar, saw him watching me with tear-filled eyes, as if pleading. "No," I replied immediately, with a certainty that surprised me. "I'll take him home with me, at least until we find his family." I don't know where I got that determination, but looking into his eyes, I knew I couldn't let him go anywhere else. Leaving the police station, Oscar still held my hand tightly, his small steps keeping close to mine. It was already evening, and a golden orange light bathed the street, but my heart remained heavy. I called a taxi, helped Oscar in, and then sat beside him. The tired boy fell asleep in my arms, clutching his worn stuffed animal tightly. Seeing his pale face, I felt a nameless pain. What had this child been through? Why did he choose me, a strange old woman, to cling to? The taxi stopped in front of my house, but I hesitated. I couldn't bring a strange child home immediately, not when my heart was still in turmoil. I decided to ring the doorbell at Mrs. Rose's house, my neighbor across the street, whom I trusted the most. Rose opened the door, a surprised look on her face when she saw me there with a child. "Helen, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice worried. I gave her a quick, faltering summary. "Rose, this is Oscar. He's lost, and I still don't know what to do. Could you keep him for one night? I need time to think." Rose looked at Oscar and then at me, her eyes full of compassion. "Of course, Helen. Bring him in. I'll take care of him." She bent down, smiling at Oscar. "Come with me, little one. I have some delicious cookies." Oscar hesitated, looking at me as if for permission. I nodded and gently stroked his hair. "Go with Mrs. Rose, honey. I'll be back tomorrow." The boy nodded, but his little hand hesitated as it let go of mine, as if he were afraid it was the last time we would see each other. A few days later, I returned to the police station with Oscar. On the way, he said nothing. He just watched me silently, his eyes shining with a mix of hope and fear. I smiled at him, trying to hide the anxiety I felt inside. "Don't worry, honey," I said softly, stroking his dark hair. "Today, we're going to find out more, and everything will be all right." The police station was the same as before, with its white fluorescent lights and the faint smell of old coffee. Sergeant Thompson, the older officer from the other day, was already waiting for us in the interview room. He held a thin folder in his hand, his face serious, but with a slightly kinder expression. "Mrs. Miller, please have a seat," he said, gesturing to the worn plastic chairs. I sat next to Oscar, squeezing his hand, and felt his grip tighten on mine, as if he too was trying not to let go. Sergeant Thompson opened the folder and spoke in a deep, deliberate voice. "Ma'am, we have the results of the DNA test. The results show that you have a very close biological relationship with this child." He paused and looked me directly in the eyes. "The highest probability is that he is your grandson." His words hit me like a hammer. I froze, as if the world was tilting. "Grandson? How could that be?" I shook my head, trembling. "No, that can't be right. I don't have any grandchildren. My son Andrew, I left the sentence unfinished, my mind in chaos. Andrew had left home long ago, and after his marriage to Sarah failed, I had lost track of his life. But a grandson. That meant... I didn't dare to think further. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it would burst. I turned to Oscar, my voice breaking. "Oscar, your mom. What's your mom's name?" I practically begged for an answer, hoping he would say something to calm the storm inside me. Oscar looked at me with tear-filled eyes and said, in a voice that was clear but heavy with sadness, "My mom's name is Sarah. She always showed me pictures of the family. She told me my grandma was a good person, that my grandma loved her very much." The name Sarah was like a knife straight to my heart. I felt my breath catch, as if the air in the small room had suddenly grown thick. Sarah, my former daughter-in-law, a kind, patient girl who had never said a harsh word to me. Memories of the days when Sarah still lived at home came flooding back, as vivid as if they had happened yesterday. I remembered the afternoons she would sit in the kitchen, carefully preparing dinner, her eyes always radiating tenderness. I remembered the times she took my hand to tell me about her dream of opening a small bakery, her voice full of enthusiasm. And I clearly remembered the day my son, Andrew, insisted on a divorce to run after Jennifer, his young and elegant mistress. I argued with him with all my strength, trying to protect Sarah until the very end. But it was Sarah herself, with red-rimmed eyes, who took my hand and in a choked voice told me, "Mom, I don't want you to be caught in the middle between him and me. This marriage can't be saved. I'm asking for your permission to leave." From that day on, Sarah disappeared from my life as if she had never existed. I tried to find her. I called her. I asked around everywhere, but found no trace of her. I lived with constant regret, blaming myself for not having done more to keep her. And now, as Sarah's name came from Oscar's lips, all that pain reawakened, sharper than ever. I asked, trembling, my voice broken, "So, where is your mom now, Oscar?" The boy lowered his head. His small shoulders shook. His voice came out quietly, almost inaudible. "Mom passed away from an illness. I live with some distant relatives. That day I went to the park alone to play, and that's where I saw you." Oscar's words were like a giant wave that swept away everything inside me. I couldn't hold back anymore, and I hugged him tightly as tears streamed down my face. "Oh my God, Sarah," I sobbed, my voice breaking. "Why did you leave so quietly?" I held Oscar with all my strength, as if wanting to protect him from the whole world. His small shoulders trembled in my arms, and I felt his hot tears soak my shirt. "Don't be afraid," I whispered, my voice choked. "From now on, I will take care of you just like your mom did." We stayed there, in the small office of the police station, crying in each other's arms. Sergeant Thompson quietly stood up and left the room, as if to give us some privacy. I stroked Oscar's hair, feeling its softness under my hand. In that instant, I knew my life had changed forever. Oscar wasn't just a lost boy. He was my own blood, part of a family I thought I had lost forever. After composing myself, I began the process of applying for temporary custody. Sergeant Thompson guided me in filling out the necessary paperwork, his voice soft but firm. "We have contacted the boy's distant relatives. They confirmed they are not in a position to care for him long term. If you wish, you can take temporary charge of him until the official proceedings are completed." I nodded without hesitation. I didn't know how I would do it, but the only thing that was clear was that I couldn't let Oscar go anywhere else. On the way home, I stopped at a small shoe store in the neighborhood. Oscar's old shoes were completely worn out, the strap nearly broken, and every step he took broke my heart. I took him inside the store and picked out a pair of blue sneakers, the kind I thought a boy like him would like. Oscar hesitated, looking at the new shoes with a mixture of surprise and shyness. "Grandma, these are too expensive," he murmured, as if afraid I would change my mind. I laughed and stroked his head. "They're not expensive, honey. You deserve to wear a good pair of shoes." The salesman smiled and helped Oscar try them on. When the boy put on the new shoes and took a few steps, I saw a radiant smile, a rare sight on him, spread across his face. He turned to me, his voice low but full of emotion. "My mom said you were the best person in the world. Now I believe it." Oscar's words were like a warm breeze blowing into my frozen heart. I squeezed his hand tightly, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. Silently, I made a promise to Sarah's soul. "From now on, I will never let your son go through hardship or feel abandoned again." After completing the temporary adoption paperwork, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. Andrew, my son, had to know about Oscar, about the truth that the boy was his son, blood of our family. But the thought of confronting Andrew with those unhealed wounds between a mother and son weighed heavily on my chest. I hadn't seen him much since the day he left Sarah for Jennifer. Every time I thought about it, a dull ache shot through me, like an old wound that never closed. But for Oscar, I had to do it. The boy deserved to know his father, and Andrew had to take responsibility for the son he never knew he had. That evening, I took Oscar to his house. A light rain was falling, and the drops slid down his new coat, while his blue shoes shone under the streetlights. I took his hand and felt it tremble inside mine. "Don't be afraid," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though inside I was a whirlwind of emotions. "Today, you're going to meet your dad. Everything will be fine." Oscar nodded, though his eyes reflected worry. He clutched a worn stuffed animal to his chest, as if it were his only shield against an unknown world. I stopped in front of the gate. I took a deep breath and opened it. As soon as I did, Jennifer was already there. She wore a bright red silk dress, her hair meticulously curled, but her smile tensed when she saw me with an unfamiliar child. "Mom," she said in a sweet voice, though she couldn't hide her surprise. "And who is this?" Before I could answer, Oscar squeezed my hand tighter and hid behind me, as if trying to escape Jennifer's inquisitive gaze. I felt his fear, and it broke my heart. "This is Oscar," I replied, trying to sound calm. "He is someone very important to me." I didn't want to reveal the whole truth right then, not in front of Jennifer, not while Oscar was trembling beside me. Just then, Andrew came out of the living room, wearing a slightly wrinkled white shirt, his face tired. He stopped when he saw me, and then his eyes fell on Oscar. For a moment, I saw his eyes widen, as if he had seen a ghost from the past. "Who is he?" His eyes grew moist, and I knew he had recognized Sarah's familiar features in the boy's face, the large round eyes, the small nose, and that shy smile she used to have. The atmosphere in the spacious living room suddenly became suffocating. I took a deep breath and told them everything, briefly but clearly. From the moment I met Oscar in the park to when he took my hand in the grocery store, and finally the DNA result at the police station, confirming that Oscar was my grandson, Andrew's son. I spoke without looking him in the eye, because I was afraid that if I did, I wouldn't be able to contain the pain that was overflowing inside me. When I finished, the room sank into a heavy silence. Andrew stood there, his arms hanging limp, as if he didn't know what to do with himself. Jennifer, sitting on the sofa, clasped her hands tightly, trying to hide the discomfort reflected on her face. "Oh, so he's Sarah's son," she said in a sweet but fake voice, as if trying to mask her bewilderment. "What a surprise." Her gaze shifted to Oscar, cold as ice, and I saw the boy press closer to me, as if wanting to escape those eyes. Andrew, trembling, extended a hand toward Oscar, his voice hoarse. "Son, come to Dad." But Oscar immediately backed away, clinging to my leg and murmuring, "I don't want to." His voice was small but firm, as if he had built an invisible wall between himself and the father he never knew. I saw Andrew's expression darken, a fleeting pain crossing his face. I wanted to say something to ease the tension, but my throat closed up and I couldn't utter a word. I knelt down, hugged him, and tried to calm him. "It's okay, honey. This is your dad. You don't have to be afraid." But Oscar just shook his head and whispered in my ear, low enough for only me to hear, "Grandma, I don't want to be near the stepmother." That innocent phrase pierced my heart like a knife. I looked at Jennifer and saw her press her lips together. Her eyes flashed with annoyance before she quickly returned to her serene expression. I knew she had heard, and I also knew she didn't want Oscar there. I stood up, looked Andrew directly in the eyes, and my voice sounded firmer than I expected. "Andrew, you need to know the truth. Oscar is your son. He's my grandson. I've filed for temporary custody, but you have to take responsibility for him." Andrew opened his mouth as if to say something, but remained silent, his gaze lost, as if trapped between the past and the present. Jennifer got up, walked over to Andrew, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mom, we need time to think about this," she said, her voice sweet but cold. "We weren't expecting a child to just show up like this." The way she emphasized the words "show up" made me clench my fists, holding back the anger boiling inside me. Oscar wasn't a surprise. He was the blood of this family, the son of Sarah, the woman Andrew once loved, and the grandson I swore to protect. I held him tighter, looking at Andrew with disappointment etched in my voice. You already abandoned Sarah once. Don't let this child suffer another wound. Andrew lowered his head, not responding. Jennifer stood there, a forced smile on her lips, but I could feel the tension in her every gesture. The next morning, I woke up with a spark of hope. I wanted to believe that if I gave Oscar more time, he would gradually get used to Andrew, to the house, and also to the little sister he hadn't met yet. I looked at Oscar sitting on the small sofa in the living room, his new navy blue shoes neatly placed beside him, the stuffed animal still in his arms. The boy looked up at me, still a little shy, but I saw a growing trust in his eyes. I heard the crystal-clear laughter of Lily, Andrew, and Jennifer's young daughter coming from the bedroom. I took Oscar's hand and led him to the door. I opened it. The little girl was sitting on the floor, surrounded by a pile of colorful jigsaw puzzle pieces. As soon as she saw Oscar, Lily exclaimed in a high-pitched voice, "Brother, play with me." The girl ran towards him. She took his hand with an innocence devoid of any shyness. Oscar looked surprised. His big eyes widened, but then a genuine smile, the first I had seen since I met him, appeared on his lips. The boy sat on the floor, letting Lily place a puzzle piece in his hand. "It goes here, brother," Lily pointed enthusiastically, and Oscar nodded, concentrating on putting it together. I stood silently in a corner of the room, watching the two children. Lily chattered nonstop, and Oscar, though not very talkative, began to respond in a soft voice, full of goodwill. Watching them so engrossed with the pieces, I felt my heart warm in a strange way, a simple, small joy, but so precious. I suddenly remembered the days when Andrew was a child, when I would watch him play, my heart full of hope for a happy family. Now, seeing Oscar and Lily, I felt like I was recovering a piece of a lost memory, even if only for a fleeting moment. Andrew was standing at the door, watching in silence. I saw him discreetly wipe away a tear from the corner of his eye and murmur, just loud enough for me to hear, "He looks just like Sarah, Mom." Andrew's words pierced my heart. I knew he was thinking of Sarah, of the days he had lost due to his selfishness. I wanted to say something, to comfort him, but my throat closed up. I just nodded, my gaze fixed on Oscar, on that small glimmer of joy. But that joy was short-lived. Jennifer came out of the kitchen with a dishcloth in her hand, her face impassive. Seeing Lily talking animatedly with Oscar, her expression instantly darkened. "Lily," she called out sharply, "don't bother your brother. Play by yourself." She strode forward, yanking Lily's hand so abruptly that the little girl almost fell. Lily frowned, her voice full of displeasure. "But I was playing with my brother." "I don't care." But Jennifer didn't give her time to say more and dragged her down the hall. Lily looked back at Oscar, her eyes sad, as if she didn't understand why her joy had been snatched away. Oscar watched her go. The smile vanished from his face. He lowered his head, hugged his stuffed animal tightly, and shrank in on himself in silence, like a frightened little bird. I stood there, feeling the suffocating heaviness that enveloped the house. A vague unease rose within me, as if I had just witnessed something that shouldn't have happened. Jennifer turned around with a forced smile. "Mom, the girl is little and very clingy. I just don't want her to bother Oscar." But her cold, distant eyes revealed another truth. I clenched my hands tightly, containing the anger burning inside me. I wanted to say that Lily wasn't bothering Oscar, that they were having fun together, but I knew that even if I said it, it wouldn't change anything. That night, dinner was served at the large table, but almost no one spoke. Oscar sat next to me, eating slowly, his gaze lowered. Lily, sitting across from him, occasionally glanced up at her brother, but every time she tried to open her mouth, Jennifer would quickly interject, asking her about homework or some other trivial thing. Andrew remained silent, his gaze lost, as if trapped between the past and the present. After dinner, as I was passing through the kitchen to get more water, I accidentally overheard Jennifer and Andrew fighting. She was trying to keep her voice down, but the anger was evident in every word. "Don't you see it? The appearance of that bastard is going to tear this family apart. Are you going to let him get between us?" Jennifer's voice was sharp, like a knife. I froze at the doorway, my hand unconsciously tightening on Oscar's, who was standing beside me, listening to everything in silence. Andrew responded, with anger but also a tremor in his voice. "Don't say that, Jennifer. He's my son." His words were like a stab, not just to Jennifer, but to me as well. I heard Oscar let out a choked sigh and saw his small shoulders shake. The boy squeezed my hand tightly, as if afraid that if he let go, the storm of those cruel words would drag him away. I pulled him against my chest, moving him away from the kitchen door so he wouldn't hear any more. But the damage was already done. The small joy I had seen on his face when he played with Lily was now extinguished by Jennifer's pettiness and cruelty. I stroked his hair and whispered, "Don't be afraid, honey. I'm here with you." But deep down, I knew those words weren't enough to soothe the pain he had just felt. In the days following that tense dinner, I noticed a significant change in Oscar. The shy smile he used to have when playing with Lily was gone. Instead, he became quiet, like a little shadow that hid in the corners. Whenever I tried to talk to him, he would barely respond with short phrases, always keeping his eyes on the floor, as if hiding something. When Lily ran to invite him to play, he would refuse as well. "I'm tired," he would say, with a forced smile, and then sit still in his chair, hugging his worn-out stuffed animal. I started paying closer attention. Every time Jennifer appeared, Oscar would fall silent. His big eyes would instantly drop, not daring to look at anyone, as if he were afraid. I asked him many times, in the softest voice possible, "Oscar, is something wrong, honey? Tell me. I'll help you." But he would just shake his head and murmur so quietly it was almost inaudible, "Nothing's wrong." I knew he was hiding something from me, and it filled me with unease. A 5-year-old boy shouldn't carry such a heavy look in his eyes, as if he were burdened with a secret I couldn't yet understand. I decided not to press him, but I promised myself I would do everything I could to protect him. I started taking him to the park, buying him ice cream, or reading together in my small room. Those moments seemed to bring him some relief, but I still felt he was hiding a fear he couldn't share. Every time I looked at his new blue shoes, I remembered his words. "My mom said you were the best person in the world," and a determination to find out what was happening grew inside me. One afternoon, I announced that I was going on a trip for a few days with some friends from the neighborhood. I packed my bag and left the house as if it were true. Jennifer saw me off, but I clearly saw a flash of satisfaction in her eyes that she couldn't hide. I walked around the neighborhood for half an hour, and then I came back home, but the door was already locked. I knocked on the door and rang the doorbell for 5 minutes until I heard footsteps running outside. Jennifer opened the door. Her face showed a moment of surprise, but she quickly forced a smile. "Mom, why are you back so soon?" she said, her voice sweet but cold. I didn't have a chance to answer before the scene in front of me left me frozen. Oscar was in the corner of the living room, holding a broom taller than himself, slowly sweeping the floor. His face was red, sweat covered his forehead, and his eyes looked exhausted, as if he had been working like this for a long time. Frightened, I ran to him, knelt down, and placed my hand on his forehead. He was burning with fever. "Oscar," I cried, my voice trembling, "how can you be sweeping with this fever?" Oscar looked at me, his eyes filled with tears, but he said nothing. He just lowered his head as if he was afraid of something. I turned sharply to Jennifer, unable to hide my rage. Why would you make him do chores in this condition? Jennifer stood there, her arms crossed, and answered calmly, as if it were nothing serious. He's just a little tired, Mom. I thought if he sweated a bit, he'd get over it. Her words were like a knife, cold and cruel. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. A 5-year-old boy, with a fever so high he was trembling, forced to sweep the house. I felt my blood boil, but I held back, because I knew if I lost control, Oscar would be even more frightened. I picked him up, sat him on the sofa, and immediately took out my phone to call a taxi. Rest, honey, I said tenderly, though my voice still shook. Grandma is taking you to the doctor right now. Oscar nodded, but his eyes were full of worry. As I helped him stand up, he whispered so softly I had to lean in to hear him. Grandma, my aunt told me not to tell anyone. She said if I did, you would hate me and abandon me. Every word of his pierced my heart like needles. I hugged Oscar tightly, unable to hold back my tears. No, honey, I sobbed. I will never hate you. I will never abandon you. Don't be afraid. But inside, a burning anger consumed me, a pain impossible to describe. What had Jennifer done to my poor grandson? Why could she be so cruel? I took Oscar to the hospital immediately. In the taxi, the boy trembled in my arms, clinging to his stuffed animal as if it were a shield. I stroked his hair, trying to sound calm. You're going to be okay. Grandma's here. But inside, I couldn't stop blaming myself. I had brought Oscar to Andrew's house hoping he would find a family, and instead, he was suffering a pain he should never have known. The doctor diagnosed Oscar with a severe throat infection and a high fever due to not receiving timely medical care. The child needs complete rest and must take his medicine at the prescribed dosage, the doctor said in a serious voice. If more time passes, the situation could worsen. I nodded, hugging Oscar tightly in the waiting room as tears streamed down my face. I couldn't imagine what that child had endured in that house under Jennifer's control. That night, when we returned home, I prepared Oscar a glass of warm milk and sat beside him on the small bed in the living room. The boy took small sips, his eyes still filled with fear. I spoke to him softly. Oscar, tell me, will you tell me what happened? I knew I was touching a wound, but I needed to know the truth to protect him. For the first time, Oscar opened up. He burst into tears. He rested his head on my shoulder, his voice trembling. Auntie makes me do all the chores, Grandma. Clean the house, wash the dishes, do the laundry. I'm so tired, but she says if I don't do it, she'll kick me out. When I got sick, she wouldn't let me rest and told me that if I told you, you wouldn't love me anymore. The boy cried inconsolably. His small shoulders trembled in my arms. I'm so scared, Grandma. I'm scared you'll abandon me. I held him tighter, feeling a rage like never before. I will never abandon you, I said, my voice breaking. You're my grandson. You're everything to me. I will protect you, no matter what. I stroked his hair, feeling his hot tears soak my blouse. At that moment, I swore to myself, I will never again let Jennifer or anyone harm Oscar. The next morning, as the sun was just rising, I woke up with a fierce determination. I watched the boy sleeping on the small bed in the living room. His face was pale but peaceful, the stuffed animal still in his arms. I gently stroked his hair, my heart tightening as I remembered what he had confessed the night before. I knew I had to act immediately, not just for Oscar, but also for the silent promise I had made to Sarah that I would protect her son with all my heart. I prepared a simple breakfast, some toast with jam, and a glass of warm milk for Oscar. The boy woke up, his eyes still tired from the fever, but he gave me a faint smile, as if trying to comfort me. "Eat your breakfast, and then we'll go visit your dad for a bit, okay?" I said, my voice soft but firm. Oscar nodded, though I noticed a flash of worry in his eyes. I took his hand and whispered, "Don't be afraid. I'm with you." In the living room, Andrew and Jennifer were sitting on the sofa, each with a cup of coffee. When she saw me arrive with Oscar, she stood up and forced a smile. "Mom, what's going on?" she said in a sweet tone, but she couldn't hide the tension. Oscar pressed closer to me, his little hand gripping mine tightly, his gaze fixed on the floor. I sat him down in a chair, placed my hand on his shoulder to reassure him, and then looked directly at Andrew and Jennifer. "I'm not going to beat around the bush," I began, my voice trembling with anger, though I tried to remain calm. "Yesterday, I saw Oscar with a high fever, his face burning, and you still made him sweep the floor. He's only 5 years old, Jennifer. 5. You neglected him. You didn't take him to the doctor, and on top of that, you threatened him, telling him that if he told me, I would stop loving him and abandon him." I paused, taking a deep breath, feeling my heart pound. "I saw it with my own eyes, Jennifer. What do you have to say for yourself?" Jennifer immediately denied everything, her voice high-pitched and defensive. "Mom, don't listen to him. He's making things up. Kids lie a lot. I just asked him to do a few chores so he could learn to be independent. Don't exaggerate." She glanced at Oscar, a cold look in her eyes, as if to threaten him in front of me. Oscar trembled and pressed closer to me, and that made the rage inside me erupt like fire. "I am not exaggerating," I replied, my voice icy, looking her straight in the eye. "I saw with my own eyes the child with a high fever, holding a broom taller than himself. Do you think a 5-year-old needs independence by sweeping the house while he's sick? Do you want more proof?" I turned to Andrew, hoping he would say something, that he would stand up for his son. But Andrew just sat there, his head in his hands, his face full of confusion and helplessness. I really don't know what to do," he mumbled, his voice weak. Andrew's words were the final blow. I looked at my son, in whom I had placed so many hopes, and felt an infinite disappointment. "You can't even protect your own son," I said, my voice trembling with anger and pain. "Then let me do it for you." I stood up, picked up Oscar, and faced them both. "From today on, I'm moving out with Oscar. The boy can't live in a house where his stepmother is cruel and his father is a coward like you." Jennifer opened her mouth, about to protest, but I raised my hand to stop her. "I haven't finished speaking," I continued, in a tone firmer than ever. 70% of what I have, I will leave in a will to Oscar as compensation for everything he and his mother have had to endure. The rest I will put into a trust for Lily so she can have a good future, and you and your wife will not receive a single penny. I emphasized each word as if wanting to burn my decision into their minds. The room fell into absolute silence. Jennifer's face was pale, her lips pressed together, her eyes shining with anger but not daring to speak. Andrew lowered his head, unable to look at me. His hands clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. I knew my words had been a harsh blow, but I didn't regret it. Oscar needed me, and I would do whatever it took to protect him. I took Oscar's hand and led him out of that house. On the way, the boy was silent, but his small hand never let go of mine. When we got on the bus, Oscar looked up and whispered, "Grandma, I don't have to go back there, do I?" I knelt down, hugged him tightly, my voice choked. "That's right, honey. From now on, you're going to be with me, just me." The next morning, I packed a few things, just the essentials for the two of us. I took Oscar to Rose's house, my lifelong friend and the person I trusted most. When Rose opened the door and saw us there with a few simple bags, she understood immediately. "Helen, come in," she said, moved and hugged us tightly. "Stay here as long as you need. My home is always open for you." I smiled on the verge of tears. "Thank you, Rose," I said. "It will just be temporary. I'll find a place for us soon." That night, I made up a bed for Oscar on the small cot in Rose's living room. The boy snuggled under the blanket, hugged his stuffed animal, and for the first time since I met him, he slept soundly, without the fearful look or the nightmares that used to startle him. Watching him sleep, I felt a sense of relief wash over me, though the thought of Andrew still pained me. I had lost my son to his bad decisions, but I wasn't going to let Oscar suffer the same fate. A few days later, I found a small, nice apartment near the park where I had first met Oscar. It wasn't large, just one bedroom and a small living room, but it was warm enough for the two of us. I cleaned it myself, set up a little bed for Oscar, and hung some colorful pictures to liven up the place. I also bought a small bookshelf and filled it with some children's books I thought he would like. When Oscar walked into the apartment, his eyes lit up and he ran all over, touching everything with curiosity. "Is this really our home, Grandma?" he asked in his clear little voice. "Of course it is, honey," I replied, smiling. "From now on, this will be our home." Oscar nodded, a radiant smile on his face, and I knew he was starting to feel the security I had promised him. That same day, I dedicated myself to finishing the paperwork to apply for official custody of Oscar. As I signed the last paper, my hand trembled, not from fear, but from immense relief. At last, my grandson had a real home, a place where he would be loved and protected. Several months passed since we moved. Our small apartment slowly became a real nest. I taped the colorful drawings Oscar made at school to the walls, next to the bookshelf filled with the stories he loved so much. Every morning, I would take him to the nearby kindergarten and watch him run to the playground with his friends, laughing out loud. Seeing him regain his innocence, I felt my heart warm up again, although sad memories still sometimes returned in silence. Our life began to find a steady rhythm. I learned to balance taking care of Oscar with my daily chores. I cooked his favorite dishes, like chicken soup or egg sandwiches, and every night I sat with him to read stories or listen to him talk about his new friends at school. Little by little, he became more open. His cheerful little voice filled the apartment like a melody that healed my wounds. But I knew that deep down in those big eyes, a hidden fear still lingered, a shadow from the days he had to face Jennifer. One afternoon, while I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen to prepare dinner, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my apron, went to open the door, and froze when I saw Andrew there. He looked much more worn out than the last time I saw him, his hair messy, with deep dark circles under his eyes, and a wrinkled shirt as if he had worn it for several days. "Mom," he murmured in a hoarse, almost broken voice. I looked at him, and a mix of compassion and anger stirred within me. I said nothing, just motioned for him to come in, but inside, I knew this encounter wouldn't be easy. Oscar was sitting at the table, coloring a picture of a little house. As soon as he saw Andrew, he stopped moving his crayon, ran to hide behind me, and tightly gripped the hem of my blouse with his little hand. I felt the tension in his body, and it broke my heart. Andrew leaned down, about to call out, "Son." But Oscar turned his face away coldly, looking down, as if wanting to build an invisible wall between himself and his father. Andrew straightened up, his face marked by pain, but he said nothing more, just followed me silently into the living room. I poured 2 cups of tea, placed one in front of Andrew, and sat across from him. Oscar was still standing behind me, refusing to leave, even though I whispered, "Go play in your room for a while. I'll call you when I'm done talking to your dad." But the boy shook his head, clinging to me, as if afraid something terrible would happen if he moved away. I didn't force him, just gently stroked his hair, and then looked at Andrew with a calm but firm voice. "What did you come here for?" Andrew lowered his head, clasping his hands as if searching for the right words. "Mom," he began, his voice breaking. Everything's going wrong. My work is falling apart. Clients are canceling contracts one after another. My bosses keep pressuring me. At home, Jennifer and I fight every day. Sometimes she even leaves Lily crying alone, and I have to take her to the neighbors to look after her." He paused, taking a deep breath, trying to hold back his emotions. "Mom, I know I was wrong. I failed Sarah, and I failed Oscar too. I want to come back to live with you and my son again." Andrew's words were like an icy wind that ran down my spine. I silently placed my cup on the table and looked him straight in the eye. What he was saying, I had wished to hear a long time ago, but now it only weighed heavily on my heart. "Andrew," I said slowly, with decision, "the one you need to apologize to is not me, but Oscar and Sarah's memory. You abandoned them. You chose Jennifer, and you left a 5-year-old boy carrying wounds he should never have had to bear. I can't forget what you did." Andrew lowered his head, his eyes red, but he didn't argue. I continued, my voice trembling with emotion. "I saw Oscar with a high fever, sweeping the house while Jennifer ignored him. I heard your son tell me he was threatened, that he was forced to work even when he was sick. You are his father, Andrew, but you didn't protect him. I can't let Oscar continue to live in an environment like that." I paused and looked at Oscar, who had his head down, clutching his stuffed animal tightly. "You can come see him whenever you want, but living together like before, that won't be possible anymore." The room fell silent. Andrew sat with his head in his hands, as if trying to process my words. I saw his shoulders shake and knew he was crying. A part of me wanted to get up, hug him, and comfort him like when he was a little boy. But another part, the stronger part, couldn't forgive the mistakes he had made, not just with Sarah, but with Oscar too. Andrew stood up, his voice weak. "Mom, I understand. I'm going to try to make things right." He turned to Oscar, trying to call him one more time. "Oscar, your dad is sorry." But Oscar just squeezed my hand tighter, not responding, his cold gaze fixed on the floor. The door closed behind Andrew. His footsteps faded down the hallway, and I felt a pain mixed with a coldness in my heart. I had lost my son a long time ago, from the day he chose Jennifer and abandoned Sarah, but I wasn't going to let Oscar suffer the same fate. I turned to Oscar, knelt in front of him, and gently stroked his hair. "Are you okay, honey?" I asked in a tender voice. Oscar nodded, but his eyes were still filled with sadness. "Grandma," he whispered, "is Dad going to come back again?" I smiled, though I felt heavy inside. "If he wants to, he'll come visit you. But don't worry, I'll always be here with you, okay?" Oscar nodded and suddenly hugged me tightly, hiding his head in my shoulder. I held him close, feeling the warmth of his small body, and in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. The lives of the two of us, in that small apartment, continued on peacefully. Every morning, I took him to school, watched him run to the playground with his little backpack on, smiling brightly as he waved at me. In the afternoons, I would pick him up, and together we would go into the kitchen, preparing simple but loving meals. Sometimes a plate of fried rice with egg that smelled delicious, sometimes a sweet and mild vegetable soup. In the evenings, we would sit together on the old sofa. I would read him fairy tales, and he would listen attentively, his big eyes shining. Oscar's pure smile had returned, always present on his lips, and every time I saw it, I felt my heart warm up after so many cold days. I also found a new joy for myself. One day, passing by the nearby church, I saw a flyer for a charity cooking group. Without much thought, I signed up. Every week, along with other ladies, we prepared large pots of soup, sandwiches, and juice for the orphan children in the neighborhood. This work not only kept me busy, but it made me feel that I still had value, that I could do something meaningful. Oscar would often accompany me, helping to pick vegetables, wash dishes, or play with the other children. Watching him run and laugh with them, I realized that Oscar was gradually becoming more open and cheerful. He was no longer the shy boy who hid behind me when a stranger appeared, but a little boy full of life and a desire to have fun. Andrew started visiting more frequently, and he always brought Lily with him. The little girl, with her curly hair and bright eyes, was the one who brought Oscar the most joy. As soon as she came in, she would exclaim, "Brother Oscar, play with me," and run to hug him. Oscar, though still a bit distant with Andrew, adored his little sister. The two would often sit on the living room floor, assembling puzzles or drawing, and their clear laughter filled the entire apartment. Many times I would tell stories to both of them, or take them to the nearby park, the same one Oscar first took me to. Seeing them run hand in hand under the green trees, my heart filled with a deep warmth, as if the broken pieces of my family were slowly coming back together. One afternoon, as I was sitting on a wooden bench in the park, watching Oscar and Lily play tag, Lily suddenly ran to me, plopped down beside me, breathing heavily. "Grandma," she whispered in her clear little voice, "I wish I could be with Oscar every day." I smiled and stroked her head. "Then you have to come visit Grandma and your brother more often," I replied, trying to keep a cheerful tone, although I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Lily nodded and ran back to Oscar. Their laughter filled the air again, mingling with the golden afternoon light. Andrew stood silently on the apartment balcony, looking down at the yard where the two children were playing. I saw him turn, discreetly wipe away tears, and approach me, his voice choked. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for saving a part of this family for me." His words brought a lump to my throat. I didn't answer, just nodded silently, my gaze fixed on Oscar and Lily. I knew Andrew was sorry, but the wounds he had caused Sarah, Oscar, and myself would not heal so easily. However, seeing the two children happy together gave me some comfort. Maybe, even if I couldn't fix everything, I could still give them a complete childhood. One quiet sunny afternoon, I sat on the steps in front of the apartment, letting the soft evening light warm my shoulders. In the yard, Oscar and Lily were playing catch, their crystal-clear laughter echoing in the air. I smiled with a strange sense of peace. Our small apartment, though not large, had become a true home, a sanctuary where Oscar was loved and protected. I thought of Sarah, of her sweet smile, and I believed that, from somewhere, she was smiling to see her son growing up in my arms. That night, as I was reading Oscar a bedtime story, the boy suddenly looked up and asked, "Grandma, don't you get tired of taking care of me?" His question surprised me. I smiled and gently stroked his hair. "I don't get tired, honey. Taking care of you is the greatest joy of my life." Oscar nodded and hugged me tightly in a tiny voice. "I love you very much, Grandma." I held him close, holding back tears. "I love you too, Oscar," I whispered. "I will always be here with you." When Oscar was fast asleep, I sat by the window, gazing at the calm of the night. I thought about the journey we had traveled together. From that day, he took my hand in the grocery store to the painful moments at Andrew's house. And now, this little home I had built for him, my life at 63, which seemed destined to be spent in solitude, had found a new meaning thanks to Oscar. He wasn't just my grandson. He was my light, my reason to keep living and loving. I took an old picture frame from the cupboard, the only photo left of Sarah, taken one afternoon when she was sitting in my kitchen, smiling sweetly. I placed the picture frame on the table next to the drawing Oscar had made of a little house. "Sarah," I whispered, "rest easy. I will take very good care of Oscar." A gentle breeze came in through the window, as if carrying an answer from far away. Under the silvery moonlight, our small apartment grew quiet and fell asleep. Oscar lay in bed, the stuffed animal still in his arms, and I knew that, no matter how painful the past was, we had both found a new home, one built on true love, not on lies or regrets. After everything I went through with Oscar, I understood that life always has unexpected turns, but that true affection is the only thing capable of saving and healing any wound. Family is not built on blood alone, but also on the protection, kindness, and responsibility we give to others. If I had walked away that day, perhaps the boy would have lost faith in this world forever. The message I want to leave with you is this: never close your eyes to a child's pain or to an injustice before you, because sometimes a single outstretched arm can completely change someone's life. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers might be suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all, to reclaim your own voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for another. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. For now, on the end screen, I'll leave 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.